It's felt like a super long summer, such a long pre-season, but finally it is back. The Premier League returns tonight with Liverpool versus Bournemouth, but more importantly, Arsenal play Manchester United on Sunday at Old Trafford, and we are going to preview Arsenal's first game of the season here today on Arsenal Unfiltered. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to a very special and important episode of Arsenal Unfiltered, your 3 times a week dose of Arsenal coverage with me, your host Mark. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you are well. Why is this episode special? Well, you heard it at the top. Arsenal are back on Sunday. I'm so excited to watch a game that means something. It's been a long old time, and I was reflecting on this morning. You know, our season after the PSG tie, it kind of fizzled out. The Premier League had fizzled out for a long time, so it's felt like a long time since we've watched football that, you know, really means something to us, really has importance and is exciting as well. So look, we have new signings to talk about. We have the tactical battle between Manchester United and Arsenal. We have lineup predictions, score predictions. I'm going to get into all of that with a really big focus on the tactics today. But just before we do, if you want to follow this podcast so you get 3 times a week podcasts straight into your provider of choice, please do go and find that follow button. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening, hit that follow button. It will mean that you get all of the episodes that I produce on a weekly basis straight to you for absolutely nothing. Okay, let's start, I guess, with a little bit of a sum up with where we are at. So, for Arsenal, 6 signings through the door for the first time in a long time. No major injury issues going on. We basically have Gabriel Jesus out, but we've known about that for a very, very long time. And we have Leandro Trossard, who feels doubt at the moment. We're not 100% certain. Manchester United are in a similar position. They don't have too much in the way of injury problems. It looks like Andre Onana, who has not been in their pre-season basically at all, really. It looks like he will be back. It looks like Joshua Zirkzee might be back, but they're probably still missing Lisandro Martinez and Mazraoui. So, look, 1 or 2 injuries for both teams, but we are going to see very strong lineups on Sunday. I'm really certain of that. And we're going to go straight into that for Arsenal and my lineup prediction. And I want to talk a little bit more tactically today about why I think Mikel Arteta will go this way. So I'll run through the 11 and then I will tell you some of the picks and why I think Arteta will do this. Obviously, David Raya in goal. This is obviously all permitting. We're still 2 days out at the time of recording. We're banking on no new injury news, touch wood. David Raya in goal, Ben White at right back. I will come back to why I've picked Ben White. William Saliba, Gabriel Calafiori at left back. Similar story with Calafiori. Rice, Zubi, Odegaard. I think that's nailed on. I don't think anyone else has a real chance of breaking into that 3. And then Martinelli, Gyökeres and Saka up front. So the Gyökeres pick is obviously an interesting one as well, because that's a question we need to answer. Who will be starting the season as the number 1, number 9? Gyökeres or Havertz. Let's start with those 2 fullback choices though, because I've gone with Ben White and Calafiori. Even though we've seen Timber and Miles Lewis-Skelly have those positions on lock for the the previous season, really. Why have I gone this way? Well, first of all, I think there's a fitness thing with Timber. He's not had as many minutes as Ben has in pre-season, so there's obviously that. And I think Timber and Gabriel both sit in that first choice back four for Mikel Arteta. And I wonder if he just wants to make a choice on just one of those players. And if you're going to prioritise a player, I think you prioritise Gabriel, roll the dice on him, and maybe just come back a little bit in the risk profile with Timber, because you have Ben White. You have such an able deputy to Jurrien Timber there. Why wouldn't you? You know, I don't understand why you wouldn't go with the slightly less risky, fitter option. The other thing with Ben White, and we are obviously playing Manchester United, so the tactics of Manchester United come into this selection. The other thing with Ben White is he's so much more attacking, so much more forward thinking. I think he will really cause Manchester United problems. We've seen in pre-season the reharmonisation, I'm going to say, of that right-hand side with Ben White looking fit again, his running returning to him, his physical capabilities being back, and how he's got around Bukayo Saka and really given teams, at times, some difficulty on that right-hand side. I'm not saying it's been perfect all pre-season. Pre-season is generally a bit disjointed, but there's been flashes of those two being back, combining really, really nicely, and both looking pretty fit, pretty sharp. So we want to see that. And with Manchester United especially, their vulnerability will be down the flanks, okay? They have the 3 centre-back system, the 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1, however you want to call it. But what that will mean is that they have one wing back. I presume it's going to be Dorgu down that left-hand side for Manchester United. Sometimes Dalot comes and plays off the right as well, but off the left. I presume he will be on the right with Dorgu on the left. So will Yuri Timber put that same amount of pressure on a player like Patrick Dorgu as Ben White will? I don't think he will, and I think Ben White will turn Dorgu around over and over and over, and what that will mean is someone will have to go and support Dorgu. That is either the left centre-back coming out to meet Saka and Ben White, leaving a space for potentially Martin Odegaard to get into, or Cunha tracking back. And Cunha is not, he's a really good player. I rate him. I think Manchester United have done a good job to get him in. He's not going to track back as diligently as, say, like a Martinelli or someone, someone we watch week in, week out. So for me, the White selection really, really enables us to throw a punch in the other direction. Of course, we're looking at Cunha, we're looking at Mbeumo and Sesko and thinking these guys are more of a threat than they were last season. And I will come on to that because I think there's going to be a really interesting start to the game. But I think Ben White will provide us with enough defensive solidity to deal with those players, but then also turn them back around and get them running towards their own goal. And it's the exact same reason why I've picked Calafiori. I don't think Arsenal will want to centralise this game. They won't want to bring the ball into those areas, into the centre of the pitch too much, where Manchester United may be able to capitalise on maybe some early season sloppiness. And that's not a criticism of Arsenal, but that is something that might happen. You might lose the ball in that area. We've seen Arsenal do it lots of times. With Miles Lewis-Skelly has done it. Thomas Partey did it a lot last year. Saliba's had it. Those central areas where we're taking risks, and the ball's going in there, and we're taking risks to play through those central areas and receive the ball on the half turn. I don't think Arsenal will want to do that because that's where all Manchester United's good players are. Look, Bruno Fernandes is their threat, right? Let's think about it. He's the threat. So you've got to maybe keep the game away from Bruno Fernandes, I think, and you can't allow a transition to happen in there where he's able to release Bryan Mbeumo quite quickly, where he's able to release Sesko or Cunha. So I think they'll want to play Calafiori and get Calafiori getting wide and driving up that left-hand side for the exact same reason we'll have Ben White driving up the right-hand side. From there, I think that the plan for Arsenal will be we're going to just keep them back. That's how we're going to deal with this Manchester United team. Yes, you've got fancy new strikers, absolutely. But we're going to make sure that you can't get to them. You can't access them by not allowing you the ball in the central areas, not giving you transition opportunities, and pinning your fullbacks and wingbacks so far back that you either have to allow us space in between your back three centre-backs, or you're pulling Cunha and Mbeumo back to track our fullbacks. I guess the other surprising pick in my lineup is Gyökeres over Havertz, or perhaps not surprising, but maybe one that we might be questioning. For me, if Havertz didn't have that injury that kept him out of one of the pre-season games, I think he would be starting. I think Mikel Arteta really likes familiarity, doesn't he? He really, really likes systems and players that he knows he can trust and all of that sort of stuff. Kai Havertz is a truly tremendous player who is underrated at Arsenal, and I think if he had the fitness, he would be in. However, I just think that final knock just towards the end of pre-season means Gyökeres will come in, and of course the Ruben Amorim narrative will be there. This is kind of the Gyökeres-Sesko derby now, isn't it? We thought we were going to get Sesko, they thought they were going to get Gyökeres. It's ended up the exact reverse of that. So it's really interesting actually how that narrative will play out. Will Victor Gyökeres come back to haunt his former boss, Ruben Amorim, and will he be providing Mikel Arteta potentially some very key information about the 3-4-3 system that might help us figure it out a little bit better than perhaps we did last year against Manchester United, because we played out a couple of torrid performances against them in the second half of last season. Okay, let's get straight into some tactical things that I think we need to watch out for. And I think one, I've already mentioned him already, one major threat for Arsenal from Manchester United is Bruno Fernandes. Now, this guy, I really can't stand him because he's the kind of player who I would not want at Arsenal for love nor money. I would not want him near our squad. He just has a terrible attitude, especially for a captain of a club. He really doesn't work that hard, and I'm amazed that, United fans are still so keen on him. But of course, the reason that they are is his goal and assist record is truly remarkable. Like, really, really good. You cannot question this guy's output. He is really, really dangerous when he gets the ball in central areas. And again, that's why I think we won't be progressing through Miles Lewis-Skelly too much and bringing him in there. I think that will be a risk that we don't want to take, and we won't want to get transitioned in that area. We want to keep it round the flanks and attack down the sides, where Manchester United are probably weaker, right? So we have to figure out, okay, if Manchester United are in this game, if they're able to keep the ball, they will be looking for Bruno Fernandes. How do we nullify Bruno Fernandes? And I think it's very simple. I think you are going to see Martin Zubimendi track this guy across the pitch all day long. One thing I certainly didn't picture as an Arsenal fan, and when we first signed Martin Zubimendi, was the kind of defensive intelligence that he seems to have. Watching him in pre-season, watching him snap into tackles, the timing of his tackles, bits and bobs like that, I've been super impressed. How well he defends and how good of a nose he has for danger, right? I really thought we were bringing in a kind of a really crafty, more Busquets than Rodri, if that's a good way of putting it. But I think we've got a lovely balance of the two of those players. I'm not saying he's as good as those players before anyone, laughs at me or jumps down my throat. But I think he's a really nice balance between the two and does a really, really lovely job in some of those defensive moments. And I just don't think, I think it's a bit unclear who United will play in there alongside him. You might see maybe a Mount. You might see an Ugarte. You probably will see an Ugarte, actually thinking about it now. They're not too much of a threat to Arsenal. And I really don't think that they will be worried about the other player that's in that central place. The threat is Fernandes. So I think it will largely be a case of Zubimendi will be man-marking him, dealing with him, and then the space created for the other player in Manchester United's midfield will be managed as a team by Arsenal. So watch out for that. Zubimendi managing Fernandes, and just keeping on that midfield theme. Another one I think we will see is Odegaard operating in the 10 a lot tomorrow? Sunday. Now I know what you're thinking. Well, that's not exactly new news. Odegaard is always the 10 for Arsenal. But really, when you watch him, he often plays especially in defensive periods, in a kind of right centre midfield, doing lots of different jobs. I think there is an argument against this 3-4-3 system where Arsenal will probably create a bit of a box in defence where they'll go Rice and Zubimendi, Gabriel and Saliba to manage that space. I think there is a very big opportunity for them to say, we're going to push Cunha and Mbeumo back using the fullbacks, as I say. That will mean there isn't an overload in that central area around that defensive box that I just described. There isn't an overload for Manchester United, which means Martin Odegaard can get in behind Fernandes and Ugarte. And I think this is the big flaw in the Amorim 3-4-3 system. I said it when he first came in, and I think his first game was against Ipswich or a team like that, and I watched it because I was really curious, really, really curious, and it was just so painfully obvious from the first moment. You need a 6. You need a 6. If you are going to be a dominant ball possession heavy team, if you are going to be a team that wants to be on top in games in the way that Arsenal and Manchester City are, and maybe even you could say Liverpool, you need a 6 that's going to back you up and deal with when it goes wrong. Manchester United don't have that. They play the 2 in midfield, which means Rice and Zubimendi can go up against those two. I think Zubimendi, like I said, will be on Fernandes. Rice will be covering ground in and around Zubimendi and Fernandes, of course, which will leave Odegaard space to go in behind those two. And I think, look, we will see probably a lot of the early switches that we have had in pre-season to try and get into the wide areas, and we'll see lots of progression down the wide spaces. If that breaks down at any point, I expect to see Martin Odegaard on the ball a lot, driving into that 10 position, because there really isn't anyone to go and track him. Yes, Ugarte could, but then you are really, really lost in that central area with Declan Rice and his running power. Rice can then come and fill in and take spaces and take the opportunity. So I really don't think that this is a system that works great in the Manchester United context of this season, where they might look to kind of step forward a little bit more. They might be aiming to have a bit more of a dominant season with the way they've purchased the three attackers, I should say, that they've purchased. Previously, we've seen them sit more in a 5, rather than a 3, and then break and, snatch wins that way. I can't see that being accepted this year by the players that they've brought in or the fans who've seen them spend 200 million quid on these players. So there's going to be spaces. They're going to go for this a lot more. And Martin Odegaard will drift into those spaces in the 10 spot where they don't have like an out-and-out 6 who will be covering that area in front of their 3 centre-backs. And I think it will spell trouble for them, because if one of those centre-backs is running forward to Martin Odegaard, he can turn them. He absolutely can. He looks fresher. He looks better. He looks fitter. He's had a decent looking pre-season. And I think he will be physically ready for that challenge. And if Ugarte comes back, like I say, Rice will be filling in spaces into those gaps. And it'll become easy pickings, I think, for Arsenal at that point. And finally, I've already said it, Arsenal will be trying to exploit the wide spaces. I've said it from the context previously of kind of, let's keep the wing-backs back, and that will probably, if we're creating overloads out there, that will drag Cunha and Mbeumo back. There is another way that this could play out. So if we are overloading Dorgu and Dalot, using White and Calafiori, Saka and Martinelli, as 2-on-1 scenarios and creating those, we will either pull those players back, pull the attacking players back, or United will cheat, and they will keep those players high in the hope to transition on us quickly, play a long ball over us. But what will have to happen is United will have to take a risk with their wide centre-backs. Because they can't allow the 2-on-1 to just keep repeating, they will have to have, I think it's probably Lenny Yoro, who plays at the right centre-back, and, Martinez is out. I wonder if Shaw will be in there at the left centre-back spot for United. One of those guys will have to step out and join. They will really struggle to bring one of their 2 midfielders across, or as I say, they'll bring an attacking player back. But in this context, I'm talking about them cheating and trying to go over us. If they do that, I can see Arsenal's plan being runners through from midfield, and I'm talking Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard, and maybe even Victor Gyökeres on that left-hand side. Right, you've got Calafiori, you've got Martinelli overloading. They bring Lenny Yoro out. That creates a space for that typical kind of curved Gyökeres run into that left half space. I think United will have problems. I think they will. Let's quickly talk about them and their threat, because I mentioned it already a little bit. They've signed 3 strikers. They've spent in excess of 200 million on Sesko, Cunha and Mbeumo. They had a terrible season last season. Absolutely terrible. The worst they've ever had. Their first game is at Old Trafford against historically their biggest rivals. Obviously Liverpool and all of that, but there's that special rivalry between Arsenal and Manchester United built up in the early noughties that I don't think will be replicated in the Premier League moving forward. All of that context, all of that drama, and all of that excitement from the United fans inside Old Trafford, I think means they will go absolutely Hail Mary to try and score. And I think we might have to outlast a real 15 to 25 minute flurry from Manchester United. I think they will, like I say, I think they will cheat if we try and bring their attacking players back. I think they will go long into Mbeumo, into Sesko, and try and get Cunha and Fernandes picking up the pieces. I think they'll be very dynamic in those positions as well. I think they'll be moving around between the 3 of them, and they will be going for goals. Absolutely. So I would not be surprised to see Arsenal try and really control the game, take the sting out of the crowd, and then go into that pattern of play that we've seen from Arsenal so far this pre-season, with the slightly more direct approach, the long balls, the kind of trying to switch it to Saka. I think that will come after a kind of killing of the noise period, right? I think Arsenal will really make an effort to take the sting out of the game, because Manchester United's plan will be to get ahead early, get the crowd on their side, and really build this kind of narrative of, look, we're here. We've got 3 strikers now. We're here to score a lot of goals. I think it's wild how they've done their transfer business, because last year, look, yeah, they struggled to score goals, absolutely, and they needed to sign Cunha and Bremo, completely. I'm totally with them on that. They needed to do that, but the order they've done things in is very strange. They're now turning their attention to Carlos Baleba, who I don't know if I want to say I think he's overrated. I don't know if I want to say I think it's too early. But look, he's not like a real. He's not a Declan Rice, is he? You know, he's not a sure thing signing. And I'm sure Brighton will extract every penny for him if he does go, which, again, that looks quite doubtful. Fabian Hertzler is pretty confident he will be at Brighton next season. I'm pretty certain I've seen that quote floating about. So I find it strange that Manchester United have done all three attacking signings before looking at actually Manu Ugarte is not good enough. Their central midfield area is not good enough. And I really don't think their centre-backs are good enough either. Lenny Yoro, look, he's a case to be seen. Let's figure that out as this season goes on and he gets to play a lot more regular football. Luke Shaw at centre-back, well, he's never fit for one. De Ligt, good player. Not sure I'm convinced yet in terms of, that elite level that they need. And I really don't rate the wing-backs either. So they've done a very strange job going big for three signings in the attacking phase of the pitch, which they needed to do, right? But they have not addressed anything further back. And I think that's why they will go Hail Mary for the first 20 to 25 minutes against us. If we can see that out, not concede a stupid goal, just make sure we're focused. Saliba and Gabriel absolutely on it, defending the box. And maybe just make sure that before we go flying forward with White and Calafiori, we sit in, we keep it compact, maybe double pivot with Rice and Zubi just to survive that 20 minutes. I think if we get through the first 20 minutes without a goal for Manchester United, Arsenal win this game and they win this game comfortably because, look, the squads are better. Arsenal's squad is better, and I do think, for all the reasons that I've said, there are tons of tactical options for Arsenal. Tons of them. Because they don't actually have to send White and Calafiori forward like I'm predicting. You could play Timber, Miles Lewis-Skelly, and actually just say, do you know what? We're going to bring Miles Lewis-Skelly in and we're going to create such an overload in the middle that there's no, it doesn't even matter that we're taking a risk on transition and the ball being around Bruno Fernandes. We don't care. We've got 4 in there. You've got 2, 3 maybe. And we'll be able to spring to Bukayo Saka from there. It's really interesting, this 3-4-3 system for Amorim. Big prediction, I think Ruben Amorim will be the first manager to get sacked this season. I'm going to say it here now because I think he's too stubborn to change his approach. I think he will stick with that 3-4-3. And yes, he's got better players, absolutely. But I just think the system is flawed in the Premier League. It takes out some really important positions, number 6 and the fullbacks, which a lot of teams use very creatively to do a lot of damage to other sides. They just don't have them, and I think Manchester United have set themselves up for failure. So look, I'm going to go with a 3-1 Arsenal victory. I think Gyökeres will score for narrative. I think Sesko will score for narrative, but I think that will be later in the game. I think Arsenal will ride out a storm early doors. At least I hope they'll ride out a storm, and I hope Mikel Arteta is preparing his team as such. And then I think they will just start to exploit those wide spaces, pull the Manchester United team apart with clever movement. We've seen lots of clever movement this pre-season. For that reason, I think we will win 3-1. I'm going to leave it there, guys. A very tactics-heavy show. If you've liked that show and you like me chatting a little bit more about tactics and what I think we will see and why I think we'll see it, please let me know by leaving her a 5-star review. It's so helpful and really puts a big smile on my face, but also helps lots and lots of other Arsenal fans hear the Arsenal Unfiltered word and see the podcast and allows the podcast to grow. So a 5-star review would really help, as well as following in all of your regular places. Really excited. I'm watching Liverpool-Bournemouth tonight. That's going to be fun. And then, of course, we'll be watching on Sunday. Expect my review pod early next week. Really excited to be back talking about football. And just finally, I've said it a couple of times in the summer, thank you so much for your patience and listening, keeping on listening during the summer. It really does mean the world. And it's been more difficult without football to talk about. We've spoken a lot about the same transfer rumours and stuff like that. So for those of you who've been listening consistently, really appreciate it. And the football is back now. You will be delighted to know. If you've enjoyed the summer, please reach out to me on Blue Sky, Arsenal-Unfiltered at bluesky.social.com, and we can chat on there. Otherwise, all that's left to say is thank you for following, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you very soon.